We are diving into a very important conversation about two struggles so many women face: perfectionism and people-pleasing. These patterns can impact our mental health, our relationships, careers, and our overall well-being, often leaving women feeling exhausted, overwhelmed, and never quite feeling good enough. Sam and Brecka are here from Healing House Therapy and Wellness to share why perfectionism and people-pleasing are so common among women and how they manifest in daily life, and most importantly, how to set boundaries, embrace imperfection, and cultivate self-compassion. Welcome to the show, ladies.
Thank you.
We're happy to be here.
Thank you for talking about this. This is so relatable, I feel like, for many of us out there. Okay, so from your experience at Healing House Therapy and Wellness, how does perfectionism and people-pleasing commonly show up in the lives of specifically the women that you work with?
Sam and I, we work with this a lot. I think this is probably up there with one of the most common things that we work with at our practice. I think from what I see, people-pleasing and perfectionism, it shows up a lot as with a smile on your face, with resentment and exhaustion, and smiling through it. I think that there's a lot of people just kind of women burned out from expectations, standards, in all sorts of areas: your career, your parenting, your relationship, your home, right? Your social media, and even your appearance. And that's really draining. And I think that with perfectionism and people-pleasing, there's this difficulty to say no and putting other people's feelings before our own. And if we're constantly filling other people's cups up, ours is going to be drained, right? And that's what's going to lead to that resentment. That's what's going to lead to that burnout. And it's also going to lead to feeling like things are never enough, right? Even when we are performing at max or doing max effort, like, it's never going to feel like we're doing enough. Like, there's always going to feel like we can do more. And even just like saying that, like, it's just like, that sounds so like exhausting.
It does. I feel so many people can relate to that. It's never enough. It's never, ever enough.
Yeah.
Okay, what are some misconceptions people have about perfectionism and people-pleasing?
I think we're speaking to that now, like this never enough idea. So I think the biggest misconception is that perfectionism is simply striving for excellence or having really high standards. It's just being really good, right, at things. And in reality, it runs so much deeper than that. It's this crushing feeling that your worth as a person is tied to your achievements.
Ooh.
It's looking at nearly perfect performance and only seeing the flaws, then internalizing those flaws as evidence of your inadequacy. It's exhausting, and it steals from the accomplishments that should be celebrated. Perfectionists often feel like a failure if they don't meet their impossibly high standards, and they're always feeling unsatisfied. One misconception about people-pleasing is that those people are just being kind or considerate, when true people-pleasing involves sacrificing your own needs and values to maintain others' approvals, often at significant personal cost. So true people-pleasing isn't about generosity. It's often fueled by fear. It's saying yes when every single part of you is screaming no. It's often like abandoning your own needs, values, not having boundaries in place because of the thought of disapproval that feels genuinely threatening to people that struggle with people-pleasing. What's particularly painful is how often we celebrate these traits in our culture, right? Like, we're always praising the employee who works themselves.
Gosh, it's so true.
To the bone, right? To the, the friend that's always there to ask for help, that never says no, that always shows up in your corner. Like, we celebrate these people.
Yeah.
Research consistently shows that these patterns impact our overall well-being and performance over time. So even though they're celebrated, like Brecka said, it's just going to lead to burnout, exhaustion, and probably eventually resentment.
Sure. I mean, that's exactly what it would lead to. That makes sense. We talked about the patterns. How do they develop? Is it rooted in like childhood, societal expectations, or both?
So kind of breaking that down, I'm going to start with childhood, because one of my favorite things to do with therapy is to dig deep, right? I think we can work on coping skills and work on the symptoms that we're experiencing, but it's so important to understand why. Why are we the way that we are? Why are we doing things the way that we are? So that's where like real change can come from.
The roots.
Right. So thinking of childhood and where perfectionism and people pleasing comes from, I was joking around with Sam when I was talking about this, but like the oldest daughter, right?
Yeah, that's me too.
Not in every oldest daughter situation, but I think there's a little bit of like, I can never say this word right, parentification, right? Or even if that's not there, but just like the expectation to kind of help with siblings or heaven forbid, like manage your parents' feelings, right? This is something that I love to talk about, right? Because how many times do we, want our children to manage our feelings for us, right? Like stop throwing a tantrum, stop doing this, right? Is it really an issue or is it really we can't handle it and deal with it? So we need them to control it in order for us to be able to control our feelings because we're uncomfortable.
Gosh. That is a crazy way to look at it, but so good because that's the truth. Is it just because we can't handle their feelings?
Right.
Oh.
I mean, as a mom, that's like literally always in the front of my head.
Same.
Like, why am I saying no, right? Is it for me or is it because there needs to be a no or a boundary, right? And I think with that, we kind of learn to adhere to other people's feelings, right? Like, I can't do this because mom will get mad. I can't do this because dad will freak out, right? And so from this young age, we're learning to adhere, like to silence ourselves to make other people comfortable, right? And to make them happy.
Yeah.
Which is really unfortunate. And I think there's also with childhood, right? Like, how often do we focus on performance, right? Like, you did so well in school versus, I don't know, something else that isn't like performance related. Again, so it ties into we're getting love and validation based on how I'm acting, how I'm performing, how good of a sister or brother I am, how good of a student I am, how good of a daughter I am. And so those things we don't just grow out of them, right? We grow into them, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And I think that kind of sets up that stage for those wanting to be perfect and wanting to please everybody else. And then I think like what Sam said, like kind of the society, I think there is this big pressure on women to kind of do it all. As I was thinking about this, I thought of this song, and I'm missing it, but it's like and I'm too messy.
I know you're talking, yeah.
And I won't say the rest.
There's a few swear words in there.
I'll blurb that out.
Yeah.
Right? But it's just kind of like, no matter what we do, it's never enough, right? And so not only is that started in our childhood, but it's carried on through our adult life of like, we can never just be and just be enough. And so, I mean, we want to feel validated, right? And that sucks that is society's way of validating us. And so we're seeking that validation. We're seeking that approval. And in so doing, we're running ourselves into the ground.
True. Very true. So good. Okay. If we are running ourselves into the ground, what are some of the consequences of constantly striving for perfection and putting others' needs before your own? What's going to happen?
The consequences can be profound. Like physically, many women experience chronic stress, sleep problems, headaches, digestive issues. Research has established a connection between these chronic stress patterns and increased vulnerability to autoimmune conditions. Our body literally begins fighting themselves, right? Emotionally, perfectionism and people-pleasing leads to anxiety, depression, shame, and sometimes losing touch with your identity or your authentic self because you're just used to masking and showing up in ways for others versus for yourself. I want to talk a little bit about professionally how this might show up. These patterns can cause procrastination. That might come from fear of not doing something perfectly. A person might have difficulty delegating or experience that burnout that was mentioned earlier. And burnout is something that I'm particularly passionate about. I think the thing with burnout is like, it's not something that's going to be fixed with a nap, right? Or even like a really good month of sleep where you're getting naps and you're doing self-care. Like,
good point.
Research is showing like burnout can impact a person for years after, being in the recovery process, trying to recover mentally, emotionally, and physically, trying to heal your nervous system. So there really can be this big ripple effect on our mental, emotional, and physical health, as well as like the relationships in our life, right? It's like just this ripple effect that can impact multiple areas of our lives.
Yeah, it can literally affect you think about mental health, of course, but then also our physical health turning into disease, possibly.
Exactly.
Well, you hear that like all over, like, again, TikTok and stuff, right? But like women with gut issues, right? Or autoimmune disorders. And I feel like that's such like a big topic right now of all these women with all these like physical symptoms. And of course, they're rooted in other things as well. It's not to say this is all it, but but like research literally shows that it is because of these things like that are putting chronic stress on us and these expectations that are like
can make us susceptible to them.
Yeah.
What about in our relationships? How is it going to affect like our family, romantic relationships, or maybe friendships?
So thinking of like romantic or like you said, friendships, I think it creates a huge imbalance, right? How many times have we like said, oh, whatever you want is fine, right? When it's really not. And we're just kind of like pushing down what we want, what we need, and masking ourselves, right? To make the other person feel happy and comfortable, right? I think that happens a lot, and that creates like this huge imbalance. But it's tricky, right? Because we're told to be selfless, right? We're told and praised for putting other people first. But then what's like the consequence of that, right? And like I said, it creates a total imbalance, and I think it builds to like a lot of resentment. And how can we be fully happy? How can we be fully ourselves and love ourselves if we never feel comfortable showing up truly as ourselves, right? We're masking and we're not being ourselves. And that's going to be hard to learn to love yourself if you're fearful of other people loving you when you show up as you are and saying no, saying what you want, making executive decisions and things like that. I always like to say, it's not you, it's me, but then changing that, like saying, it's not me, it's you, right? So like if somebody has a problem with you, it sounds like a you problem, doesn't sound like a me problem, right? I mean, obviously that's not to just like disregard every, like maybe some things that we do need to work on, right? Personality things.
Sure.
But if we have that more mentality of saying like, you have a problem with me, that's a you problem, that's not a me problem.
Yeah. I think in this day and age too, with social media, you can fall into the having to have a lot of content and saying yes to everything. So you have, like looking perfect on Instagram and TikTok. And so I think you not only have like your romantic relationships, your work life, maybe your TikTok page is your work life, or friendships, but like it can fall into so many different categories when you're just trying to be perfect.
Right.
And it really fuels that perfectionism, like comparison and how you have to show up online, like definitely fuels the need to be perfect.
But now that we said friendship, I think that like, I hear that a lot, right? Where women feel like they don't have these genuine relationships, right? Or friendships, or feel like they're always the one to give. And then when roles are reversed, like they don't feel like people are showing up for them. And like, that's like an awful feeling to feel like you will always say yes. You'll always be the one to help someone move or take them dinner when they're sick or X, Y, and Z. And then roles reverse and you feel like you're invisible, right? I think we need to like check in with that. Doesn't mean we can't like be a giving person, but are we actually in those moments giving more than we're willing, right?
Yeah.
If we're not, chances are it's not going to lead to resentment, because when roles are reversed, maybe there's this like different understanding, like, oh, they can't give because they're unable to. And I would have done the same in the same situation. I wouldn't have bent over backwards and like forgone my own dinner and my own family dinner just to give you dinner. But why won't you do the same for me? And I think that, again, causes that imbalance when we're giving more than we're actually able to give.
Yeah. And then you feel that resentment.
Yeah.
One thing I want to add here is for our fellow people pleasers and perfectionists out there, I think that this conversation can feel scary. When I first get a client in my office who like self-identifies, like I'm a people pleaser, right, or perfectionist, one thing I like to go over with them is like, okay, well, I'm not here to change you, right? Like what I'm trying to do is we want to bring more balance to those qualities that you have. There's a lot of good qualities that come with being a people pleaser. Like those people are kind, they're caring, they're empathetic, right? It's just that those qualities are so out of balance that they're lost.
I like that, because change can sound scary. So if you're thinking like, I'm going in and someone's going to try to completely change me.
It feels scary. Yeah. Even positive change like disrupts the system. It feels scary. It feels uncomfortable. And so, it's just important to know, like, we're trying to bring balance to some of these qualities. Like, you can be a high achiever, right? With perfectionism, you can be a high achiever, but how do we help you be driven and be a high achiever while also being able to be compassionate with yourself, right?
And looking out for yourself. Yeah, that's a really good point. And I think we as women fall into that pretty easily, and we struggle with like setting those boundaries. Why is it so difficult for us? It's so hard sometimes to set boundaries, and how can we start building that skill?
So I think acknowledging why it's hard. I think that we've been trained to believe that saying no is selfish or mean. I mean, if you think about it, like think about like sharing your toys. Like we teach our kids to share our toys, not saying it's right or wrong, right? Not taking a stance on that right now.
But it starts very young.
Right, but you're saying like if you say no to somebody else, even if it's something you want, that's mean. Like let's be nice to our friends. Right? And so I think there's this deep fear that setting boundaries is going to lead to rejection. Right? And how many women, who struggle with perfectionism or people pleasing, how much of it is rooted in fear of abandonment or fear of rejection?
Yeah.
Right? And so I think that when we acknowledge that, like it's helpful to understand like it can be scary, right? I think that boundaries can sometimes feel like a threat to your very identity. And so I think I'll always say start small, right? We don't have to like all of a sudden be perfect at not being perfect, right?
Because that's a good way to look at it, yeah.
Because I think that like I catch that sometimes, when I'm working with clients in perfectionism and you give them a skill, right? They want to perfect it.
They want to be perfect at not being perfect, yeah.
And so sometimes it's like, bringing in uncomfortable things where they're not going to do well at that. And it's not being perfect at not being perfect. It's learning to be like uncomfortable. And I don't think there's a way you can perfect not being comfortable, right? Because it's messy. It's going to be different per situation.
That's why it's called uncomfortable.
Right. And so I think kind of like being uncomfortable, and I think starting small. Again, practicing like phrases, right? And I will have like set homework for a client saying, let's just pick one thing this week and like let's come up with a phrase, right? I'm not available then. Simple, right?
Feels nice to just be like, I'm not available.
Right. But it can put you again into fight or flight, and it's really scary. And then maybe come back and we're going to set a little bit extra to that, right? And so sometimes we're going to say, I'm not available then because my mom's in the hospital and I have to do X, Y, and Z. So we're, saying all the reasons why we can't to justify why we're saying.
We feel like we have to explain sometimes, right? Like this, and this is why.
Right. And this is actually a skill I learned from one of my friends. And just by watching her, whenever we'd have like a group text and someone would send out an invite, everybody would kind of be texting and saying, I can't because X, Y, and Z. And she would literally just say, that doesn't work for me. And I'm like, wow, that was bold. And then, but she's like the nicest, sweetest person. So I would never look at her and be like, oh, wow, that was kind of rude for her to say. It just was so like, okay, cool. Like, I won't, I'm not going to even try to push it because you just kind of laid that like line in the sand. And so I think kind of just starting small and building on it and coming up with like little situations where you can practice it, where it doesn't feel so threatening, and then build a little bit more on that.
That's good. Start small. What are some practical strategies of overcoming the fear of disappointing others if we're worried about constantly letting people down?
The fear of disappointing others, it often feels overwhelming because we've spent so long avoiding that discomfort, right? Like Brecka mentioned, this stems from childhood typically.
It's a long time.
Ironically, we're usually already uncomfortable, but just in a different ways. When we constantly prioritize other people's feelings and needs over our own, that's causing a different kind of discomfort.
Yeah.
So start by acknowledging that discomfort's normal. It's a healthy emotion that people experience and process regularly. Your job is not to prevent others from ever feeling disappointed.
Oh, can we say that again?
I know. I'm going to say it again. Say it with me. Your job isn't to prevent others from ever feeling disappointed. That's an impossible standard that no human relationship can sustain.
Yeah.
One practical strategy is what we call try the future self perspective. So that's imagining yourself like 5 years from now, looking back at a certain situation. Would your future self want you to honor your boundaries and needs, or continue sacrificing them to temporarily prevent someone's disappointment, right?
Ooh.
This wider lens, this step back, often clarifies which discomfort is worth enduring. We can also develop a discomfort scale. So like thinking like scale of 1 to 10, what's a number I can assign, right? Like how can we distinguish between like a minor social awkwardness of saying no on a friend group text and truly like feeling like difficult, maybe an 8's like more confrontational type situation, right? And then practice small and build up your tolerance to handling that discomfort over time. Practicing disappointing others in low risk scenarios. So saying no to small requests, expressing different opinions. Notice how this impacts the relationships around you and who are your safe people that you can practice this with. This tolerance is like a muscle. Like we go to the gym, right, to build up our physical muscles. We know I can't go to the gym once and all of a sudden have a bunch of flexibility and endurance and strength.
Good point.
I have to go and practice, and I have to be consistent, and I have to challenge myself and ask questions, right? You want to apply that to the same thing when you're talking mental health concepts like setting boundaries or overcoming people-pleasing tendencies. We need to work that brain muscle, your mental muscle. An acronym I like to go to is FEAR, right? So we're talking fear of disappointing others. So FEAR can stand for face everything and rise. So I like to kind of instill that with my clients to use as more of like a mantra or an affirmation, right? Like I can face this. I'm safe to face this. I can handle this discomfort. They can redirect the discomfort towards positive change, right? And face whatever's in front of them.
Fear everything and rise. That's good.
It might not feel good now, but long term, hopefully it'll be worth it.
Yeah. Okay, if we're talking about self-compassion, what role does that play in breaking free from those patterns?
I would say it's like the biggest piece of the puzzle. It absolutely is essential in breaking free from these tendencies. Many of us operate under this misguided belief that self-criticism is what keeps us performing well, right? That without this harsh internal voice, we'd somehow become lazy or complacent. And that couldn't be further from the truth. Sometimes it's like involuntary, right? Also, like we all kind of have that inner mean girl that can be in the driver's seat that brings us down, that criticizes us. And self-compassion can create that internal environment that acknowledges mistakes, but without the shame, without the beating yourself up. And that actually makes growth and forward movement a lot easier. Research consistently shows that self-compassion leads to greater motivation and resilience. Why? Because when we aren't terrified of making mistakes, we become willing to acknowledge them honestly and learn. Think about how you'd respond to a close friend who made an error or struggled with a challenge, right? Most likely, you'd offer patience and support. Probably wouldn't approach that friend if they were a good friend and you're a good friend. Probably wouldn't approach that friend with criticism or shame. Yet somehow we believe that we have different standards, right? We can beat ourselves up and not show up in a supportive way. This keeps us really locked in those destructive patterns. So when you can treat yourself with the same kindness you offer a good friend, this creates space to examine the patterns without defensiveness. It helps you prioritize your needs. It helps shed guilt that often derails our progress. And then it helps with that, like what we've talked a lot about today, being able to tolerate the discomfort of feelings and emotions. One resource that I think is great is Kristen Neff. She's kind of the queen of self-compassion. So she has a website, selfcompassion.org, and there's like a quiz there that you can take to kind of see where you fall and if this is an area you struggle with or if it's a strength. And then it's got so many resources. It's got different visualizations and guided imagery type stuff, meditations, articles that show there's a lot of research that's been done that backs how powerful self-compassion can be as a tool. That's a website that I recommend really.
Will you say it one more time for people?
Yeah, selfcompassion.org.
Okay.
Dr. Kristen Neff.
Okay. It's a great resource. Okay, and thinking about resources, are there any exercises or techniques that listeners can try today to kind of quiet our inner critic?
Yeah, so we have like an exercise called name, note, and redirect. So just 3 steps. The first one is to name it, because a lot of times it's happening and we're going on with our day-to-day. I mean, we're constantly thinking to ourselves and speaking to ourselves. So sometimes it's important to take a pause and say, well, what am I saying to myself, right? And bring some awareness around it, because it happens so just like naturally to talk to ourselves, right? Yeah. So the first is to name it and just say, okay, that's my perfectionistic voice speaking. And then when you catch those harsh thoughts creeping in, just give them a name, helps you realize that, like, okay, maybe that's not true. That's just like that critic voice, like the mean girl in the driver's seat. So yeah, noticing it, naming it, and then you can, second step is to note the function. So ask, what is this voice trying to do for me? So often it's trying to protect us, right? It's trying to protect us from judgment or failure. And so we can acknowledge that intention and say, I see you're trying to help me avoid disapproval. We're not criticizing our criticism, right? Yeah. We're saying, okay, like you have a job here, right? Your job is to try and protect me.
Yep.
But then we can redirect with compassion. Like, thank you for trying to protect me, but I'm going to try a different approach. And then speak to it, as Sam said, like to your friend. I think that's like an easy way to practice and redirect how we talk to ourselves, is how we would talk to a close friend. Like, it's okay to be a beginner at this, or it's normal to make mistakes, something that we would probably say to a friend. So name it, note the function, and redirect.
That's good. A lot of the time we're so much nicer to our friends than ourselves.
Yes.
So those are good reminders, good tips. How can therapy or professional support help women navigate these struggles? If you're listening right now and you're thinking, this is me, how can therapy help me?
So I said earlier, like kind of getting into the root, like that childhood of why we do the things that we do, right? And I think therapy offers that like unique space to understand those origins, because it's great to notice them now and use the tools like I just said. Yes, those are very helpful, but that's just one piece of it, right? We really want to understand and heal the root cause of where it comes from and why it's there, right? And give space to that and use, therapeutic techniques to kind of heal that space. And I think that, yeah, I mean, we do that a lot in therapy, right? I call it like the 2-part, like the coping and the tools are like the leaves of the tree, and then getting into childhood, all of those things, all of those deeper things is the root. And if we want a healthy tree, we gotta treat the whole thing.
Good point.
And I think also a therapist can like help, using their clinical judgment, like identify specific triggers or patterns, some things that like are happening, but we're not noticing, right? Like, how many times are we doing something and we don't even realize it, and somebody else points it out for us, and we're like, oh yeah, I guess I am doing that, right? And so sometimes it just takes somebody else, like an outsider's perspective, to say, hey, do you notice this is happening? Mm-hmm. And why do you think this is happening? And that can just open up the door to so many good healing conversations.
Therapy is, so speaking of healing, so healing. If you have someone listening that has never been in therapy, a little afraid of it, what does therapy look like? I mean, at least with you guys too, is it like a Zoom call? Is it in person? If someone just is having a lot of anxiety of what that, even like walking into that when they never have, but they're thinking maybe this might be something that could help me. What is it? Quickly, could you just kind of like paint that picture of what it looks like?
Yeah.
We offer 15-minute free consultations, which I think is a good starting point.
That's
right?
awesome.
Mm-hmm. So it's important you find a good fit with the therapist. Like, as you're looking, you want to look for people that have experience in maybe your specific, concerns that you have. And then every therapist has different modalities, like different techniques and ways of helping. And so that first conversation is really important. That's an opportunity for you to ask questions, for us to ask questions, for us to get to know each other a little bit and just kind of see
if it's the right fit.
See if it's the right fit. So that's number one that we recommend to people. And I explain all this. One of the questions that we ask in the beginning of the consult is like, have you been to therapy before? I think it's important to assess, like, if they've been to therapy, what has worked for them in the past, what maybe didn't work, so that I can really tailor the space to meet their needs. That's just more my style as a therapist. And then if they haven't been to therapy, there's a lot of psychoeducation. Like we walk people through, like, this is what you're going to expect in the intake. The second or third session might look like this. Goal setting might look like this. We may, that we kind of normalize some mental health stuff, because I think that's one of the biggest barriers, right, is the stigma around mental health. So we talk about mental health and try to normalize and validate their experience, answer any questions or concerns that they have. And then in regards to therapy with us, we offer virtual options, as well as we have an office in person in Bountiful right off of Main Street. So, and we've put a lot of thought and intention into that physical space, making sure it's warm and inviting and welcoming, so that can be a safe place for people to unpack this stuff that's causing them pain now, right? So yeah, if you yourself haven't been to therapy, whether it's with us or someone else, obviously we're biased parties, but we highly recommend it. Can really be just a safe person in your corner to help you build the skills and tools to do important healing work. And one of the things we talked about today is perfectionism and people pleasing, right? And when we say, when we go with what maybe in a relationship, like if we're always doing what the other person wants to do, when people get to our office, oftentimes the work that we're doing with them is identity work. It's like at the end of the day, that woman in front of me, maybe she said yes so many times, she doesn't even know what her favorite color is or what her favorite food is. And so often it's like, how do we, again, bring balance to that trait? How do we bring balance to that quality and help this person get to know themselves and start to do things that, spark joy for them.
And love themselves. Know themselves and love themselves.
That feels nice.
Love themselves.
That's just a warm hug.
We start, for some people, love yourself, self-compassion. That feels scary and intimidating and activating, right? And so we'll start with like, how can we, like the neutral approach, right? And then how can we move into liking yourself? And then we build into how can we really love and celebrate who you are.
If that's a little like startling at first, build into it.
Yeah.
That's so good. Thank you for explaining that, because I think some people might, if they haven't tried therapy yet, might be like they need the details of like, what does this look like? What am I going to be saying? What is it in person? Is it? So thank you for breaking that down, and to know that if you are feeling these things that we talked about today, you're not alone.
No, not alone.
Not alone.
For sure.
It's very, very common, and these awesome ladies can help you. Okay. And speaking of that, where can our listeners learn more about Healing House Therapy and Wellness and the work that you do?
Yeah. So overall, like we offer individual and couples therapy. We also do a lot of women's workshops. That's really fun for us. We've done some self-love events and actually some focused on self-compassion. So keep an eye out for those. We usually will announce that on our Instagram, which is Healing House Therapy, or through our newsletter. You can sign up on our website, which is www.healinghousetherapyandwellness.com. We don't just send out like announcements of our events and things. Like we send out a lot of free psychoeducation. So if you're interested in just like learning more about mental health, definitely sign up for the newsletter there and follow us on Instagram. Our phone number, if you're interested in scheduling a free consult, is 801-477-0127. We'd love to connect, so please reach out.
Also, if you're interested in this, love them or have never been to one, we also do sound baths.
Oh, I love a sound bath.
Mm-hmm. They're awesome.
Yeah, we
do it all. That's amazing. Yeah.
We've really tried to try to expand what mental health looks like and make it more accessible for people. So with the sound baths, we do sound baths at our Bountiful office, but we also have the option of doing like private ones. If you want like a creative girls' night idea, reach out.
Love it.
Yeah.
Thank you for this conversation today. I know that you have helped so many. We appreciate it so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you for chatting with me. And thank you for listening to another episode of Fresh Off the Set. Please rate, review, and subscribe, and we will see you next week.
Congrats, you made it to the end. If you want to continue to freshen up your day, you can watch us on Fresh Living every weekday on CBS Channel 2 in Utah at 1 o'clock. You can also watch us on our YouTube channel, KUTV Fresh Living, and follow us on social media. We will see you next week.